Recently, I've been trying to frame more and more things from family pictures, original photography, huge canvas art, old college basketball jerseys. And each time I'm over here scouring the internet from different brands, trying to get the dimensions exact, hoping the materials are quality. And that's where FrameBridge steps in and takes away all of the hassle. FrameBridge makes it easy and affordable to custom frame just about anything. You could design and preview your final piece online, schedule to ship your items or drop them off in person, and they're great for giving special gifts to friends and family. Visit framebridge.com or one of their local FrameBridge stores in Southport, West Loop, and River North to start framing. Today on CityCast Chicago, NASCAR races are leaving Grant Park for now. Executive producer Simone Alisea and I have the latest, plus we hear from some NASCAR converts. It's Monday, July 21st. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Morning, Simone. How you feeling?
I'm all right, Jacoby. How are you?
I am doing good. Honestly, this conversation is very funny to me because we were always planning to talk about NASCAR today. We had already recorded an entire episode of should NASCAR come back next year? Should the city bring NASCAR back? And right when we logged off Friday night, NASCAR decided to drop some news late Friday. Simone, what was that news?
Yeah, so they announced that they were going to hit pause on 2026, quote unquote, with the goal of returning in 2027. So there will be no street race in Grant Park in Chicago next year. And like you said, we were going to do this episode where we were kind of like debating, the pros and cons of NASCAR 3 years in after the end of the contract. We're sort of waiting. The third race ended this past 4th of July weekend, which was sort of the end of that 3-year contract. It was just like, oh, are they going to renew? Are they going to renew? Are they going to extend? Are they going to extend? And so now the answer we have is no but. It's kind of a no but situation going on.
Yeah. One of the sticking points, at least for us, was 2 out of the 3 weekends had rain delays, had torrential rain, shortened the race. And so it's no huge surprise that NASCAR wanted to take this time to go back to the drawing board, figure out, was this the best weekend possible? Can there be a better deal with the city? But how did city officials react to this news?
It sounds like the big sticking point in all this has actually been the date, July 4th weekend. Less because of maybe the weather thing, but really just because it's a really busy weekend in Chicago and Grant Park is prime real estate in the height of the season. That's what NASCAR said in their statement, was they were like, well, we want to continue working with the city to potentially find a new date. Also, maybe rework, see if they can reduce that buildup and breakdown time. Yeah. To, reduce those traffic impacts. And so, Alderman Bill Conway of the 34th Ward, which is where Grant Park is, where the race takes place. Conway, is sort of disappointed that they weren't able to come to an agreement on a new date, in the very near future, but is sort of hopeful that, maybe they can come to something, later. Before NASCAR made this announcement, the date had been a key sticking point. That's something the mayor had said shortly after this year's race. Another key sticking point has been just money. Getting a better deal for the Park District. Alders and the Grant Park Advisory Council, are compare it to some of the other big events that happen in Grant Park, Lollapalooza, but also the Sueños Music Festival that bring in, millions and millions of dollars directly to the Park District. Mayor Brandon Johnson was able to negotiate a better deal for the 2024 race, where the Park District got $2 million extra in addition to a portion of ticket sales and things like that. But I think there are some people who think that could be even better. I think one of the things that's been really interesting about watching this unfold is no one actually has bad words for NASCAR. And by all accounts, NASCAR has been a really
like a good partner with the city.
Partner with the city, and the other thing that's like worth noting is like their Chicago office is going to remain open. They said they're still going to be doing between now and, next summer. Yeah. Still going to be doing community engagement efforts. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. What does the NASCAR's presence in Chicago look like when there's not a race to be had? And it's interesting because most of the smoke that at least city politicians, city officials have for NASCAR really goes toward former Mayor Lori Lightfoot and sort of the deal she made and the way that deal was made, very much kind of behind closed doors. And even the downtown alders kind of didn't know what was going on.
It seems like most of their issue was the transparency, because at the end of the day, I do think NASCAR had leverage in their negotiations, right? They could have picked any city, any popular city to throw a street race in, as we see now with their options for maybe expanding to San Diego. Simone, what was your reaction after you got past the mother? We just put the episode to bed. Now we got to go back.
What was your reaction? Got to go back and record. I will say, Jacoby, you and I on this show have been pretty skeptical of NASCAR. I'm certainly not a racing person. In my view, it's just like another big Chicago event. It makes traffic really bad. It's really loud. And I'm sort of like, do we really need this to be here?
It was an event that reminded me as a Chicagoan that Chicago doesn't just belong to the people who live here. As the third largest city, we are a site that sort of belongs to consumers and viewers and tourists as well. And that, Chicago don't like that feeling. We like to pretend we're a small little insular town.
Yeah. And I was thinking about like what it'll be like to not have a race next year. And I was like, well, I probably won't even notice that we don't have a race next year because Chicago's still going to be super busy. Like, who knows if the Taste returns to Grant Park that weekend? That was obviously another big point of contention for folks. But I think I won't even miss it. Like, that's the real trick about NASCAR. It's not even so much that I'm like excited that it won't be here. I just won't miss it.
It does feel like year over year, something we talk about in our conversation with the co-hosts of 77 Flavors of Chicago, Dario, Durham, and Sarah Fada, there was a real sense from city officials, from people who attended, from content creators, that year over year, there were improvements made by NASCAR. Dario described it to me as a power play by NASCAR, to which I went, in what way? He said, well, they left the door open for 2027, which seems like a trial run for them to see if San Diego brings in more money. But on the flip side, now it's Chicago's duty to fill that spot with something that is a better option. Like, if you bring the Taste back to its normal slot, it has to be bigger and better. If it works, then Chicago wins. If it doesn't, which I don't know if it will, then NASCAR can say, see, I told you so. You mentioned, will we even notice that it isn't here next year? No, but I do think if you're trying to negotiate with NASCAR, I think you have to fill that space. You have to generate revenue you're not getting next year now, right? Even if people will argue you could have got more from NASCAR, you're not getting it next year. And so, what they say, over $100 million in local economic impact each of the 3 years. And so I do think if the city brings the Taste back, you have to throw a larger festival in some respects, which we've all said is more expensive. They are unsustainable for a lot of people in a lot of ways. But I do think now the city in some ways has to put itself in a position to compete with these private organizers who throw these massive festivals, because they have to prove, one, they can generate this kind of money on their own, and that they're not reliant on NASCAR, I think, as a way to maybe position themselves to get a better deal come 2027, if that really is on the table.
I know, and we'll just have to see. I still think it's worth hearing from our resident NASCAR converts, as we said, Dario Durham and Sarah Fada, who are the co-hosts of the podcast 77 Flavors of Chicago. So let's play that combo.
Sarah, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having us back.
And we've got Dario Durham in the building. Welcome back, Dario.
Thank you, sir.
So I want to make it clear, over the last couple of years, y'all have partnered with NASCAR to do a couple of giveaways. Y'all have attended the race. Y'all have created content for the race. And I want to ask, 3 years ago, when NASCAR, well, actually 4 years ago, when NASCAR first announced it was going to host a 4th of July street race, how did you feel when you first heard about it?
I think, like everybody, we thought that crowd is coming to Chicago, right? So I lived out in Joliet, and I was stuck on I-80 during those race weekends, and I seen all kind of flags, I seen all kind of culture, I seen all kind of people, and all I kept thinking about was like, man, that's coming to the city of Chicago. That was my first thought.
No, let's get a little more specific. You say you lived out by Joliet. They hosted races there for nearly 20 years at the Chicagoland racetrack. What do you mean by that? The NASCAR crowd is coming to Chicago. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that crowd, man, like that ain't no minority-friendly crowd. Just put it point blank. Like, it is what it is.
It's a very white Americana crowd, right? In some ways, a very white, very American forward, American proud type crowd. You see a lot of flag iconography and the like.
Absolutely. And that was my first thought, man. Like, I was like, we'll see how it's going to work, man, because, like, I don't know if the two sides are going to clash, Chicago and that crowd. You know what I mean? Like, that was my first thought. Sarah and I, we both talked about that when we heard about it. So,
well, I had no thoughts because I didn't know anything about NASCAR. But my first thoughts was the first year when they came here and they basically did not include any Chicago content creators. They did not, like, there was no engagement with the city, it felt like, looking from the outside in. That was my first year criticism, is there was no way to, like, sell this as a Chicago experience kind of thing.
It's a very good point.
Obviously, the second year that changed, I think they heard a lot of that feedback. And so we'll get into that in a little bit, I'm sure.
But on your initial hearing about it and their initial rollout, it sounds like from both of y'all, there was this question of, like, do they know who their audience is in Chicago? Is Chicago like home to NASCAR's audience, or are we going to have to watch a bunch of suburbans, out of towners, kind of flow into downtown?
Right.
But I'm not gonna lie, I got suckered in by the mock-ups, because that first thought, before I thought construction and tear down and who's gonna pay for what, I was like, let's be real, like, race cars speeding around Grant Park, Buckingham Fountain with the skyline in the background. My first thought was, like, as somebody who loves a Need for Speed, a Midnight Club, played some NASCAR racing games growing up, right? I was just like, I don't watch this, but that's mostly because I don't see myself in it. A street race in Chicago, I ain't gonna lie, that sound kind of fire. That was my first thought, was this could be amazing. But as you both point out, as you started to hear the alders push back, the community push back, as you start to see how they were or weren't working with Chicago creators, some of those questions started to kind of creep in. Did you all attend that first year?
No, honestly, too, along with those thoughts, we're around the city, just like you are. We move around the city. So the first thought we thought was like, man, we got a plan for this. You know what I mean? Like, we still have to do what we got to do. That's a huge chunk of the city that's about to be, like, just blockaded. I'm kind of like you too, though, Kobe, because on the flip side of everything I said about me with my previous experience, I was like, dude, NASCAR in Chicago is kind of dope, though. You know, like, that's kind of fire.
I think soon after, I think my first wave of criticism came around the idea that they were signing this deal with NASCAR at the same time that they were very loudly talking about and trying to execute crackdowns around the Chicago street race culture and car meetup culture and the drag races, right? What ultimately brought you all to? You talk about the second race, y'all finally got out there. I know that first weekend was rained out. Yeah. What was it about the second year that brought you all around a little bit?
Honestly, I feel like once we met the Chicago NASCAR team that works here full time, year round, we kind of understood, like, we got to ask these questions of, like, well, are you doing the best you can? Like, why is it taking so long to set up and break down? Is this the fastest possible, the minimum amount that things are shut down? Why weren't Chicago people included in the marketing of the first year? How are you making this accessible for people that live here? Or, like, how is this beneficial for the people that live in the neighborhoods that might not want to get to the... So, like, we asked a bunch of these questions, and I mean, they learned a ton from the first year, is what I heard, is they did their best to include more Chicago businesses. I mean, you had people like Lexington Betty in there, and like some of our favorite restaurants were featured in the food areas. You had a ton more Chicago content creators. Even the third year, the setup and breakdown time was shortened by 1 week. So I feel like they possibly learned even more from the second year. And then once we attended the event, that was it for me. Like, I'm not a big sports person in general, definitely not a car race person, but there was so much to do and it was so spaced out and well organized that I actually enjoyed the event. I enjoyed all of the things leading up to the race. I enjoyed the food. I enjoyed all of the activities. There's a kids zone. So
I think for me, honestly, it started a little bit before the second year when I kind of was like, okay, it could be good, right? When I saw Chicago as the backdrop with the race, that was me with okay, this can work visually, right? Because then I started thinking about this is good for people to see the city. That's what we do the podcast for, right? We want to change the narrative of the city. A lot of people don't know we have a big body of water next to us. A lot of people don't know that we have, all these different things, and that you can do these type of activities. So then I first started thinking, okay, well, this is good optics for the city, right?
This episode of CityCast is sponsored by Babbel. Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start that journey today? You can start speaking a new language with confidence thanks to Babbel's conversation-based technique that quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Just one of the 12 languages you can learn with it, including Dutch, French, Italian, which is going to be next for me, Turkish, and Russian. I love the interactive dialogues that Babbel has, which allow me to practice what I've learned right away, and also the speech recognition function, which makes sure I'm getting the pronunciation just right, which honestly, usually I'm not. Also, I love that Babbel's lessons always cover actual things that I talk about in the real world, like food, talking to people I've just met, and also food. Staying motivated to learn a new language has never been easier thanks to real-time feedback, progress trackers, and handy visualizations, in only 10 to 15 minutes a day on Babbel's mobile app or website. So get talking with Babbel. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So I know you all partner with NASCAR, so you all got an opportunity to sit down, ask them those questions, sort of get that feedback to see how the race shifted over those three iterations. What was your perspective of the race this year? I know y'all did some work before, during, a little post. Can you kind of walk us through the event from your perspective and what the scene looked like this year?
It's year upon year improvement. Build up was going to be faster, right? But then when you're there, they move stages around so that it's more streamlined and so that everybody, if you're in the grandstands or if you're on the other side of the park, you can still see, this kind of stage. And they had a whole bunch of different activations with free food, free drinks, and the one big thing for us is when we go to these events, man, water is everywhere. You know what I mean? So it's little things like that where they really catered to the experience. Plus, last year they didn't have people, and the year before they didn't have allow people to be in the general GA section up along that Art Institute side of the fence, and so they just let people sit there and camp out. And when they did that, you got more people involved and more people could see close up with those cars. And I think, the kid aspect alone too, they added, if you were under 12, kids got in for free with the general admission ticket. That was a big complaint from year 2 to 3. They addressed that, and
I think they said 60% of the attendees were first year NASCAR attendees. So
you got a lot of people out there that never seen this before. And so there were even more fun activities to do this year.
You walk down Monroe, box office, and then there's that entire part of the park that is open to the public. Anyone can go in. There's vintage cars and local Chicago businesses. Obviously there's a CPD stand and a Marines recruitment, but it's a lot of
Man, they had barbers there.
They did.
You could get a fade.
And a tattoo artist like right outside that you could get tattoos. Like all of this stuff is accessible without any tickets.
We have talked a lot about the cons of NASCAR on this show. In fact, to be transparent, I have never attended any of the 3 races. I have lived closer to the races the last 2 years. And so I have felt the traffic. I've seen the way it, kind of snarls up the park in the summer for those weeks. The noise I can obviously hear from my apartment. We've been to some real NASCAR haters. And I think if you don't go and you just focus on the bad deal people feel NASCAR cut with the city, alders, and the neighbors not being focused in, right? There's a lot to rip at NASCAR about. But what are some of the benefits as you all see them?
We've said this and probably will continue to say it. I think it's one of the most organized events in the city that you can have. I'm talking about from accessibility to water, there aren't long lines, you know what I mean? You can get, merch from everywhere, you don't feel like you're crowded on a July 5th weekend, next to somebody sweating and at the end of the day, Chicago's a sports town, man. We know this, right? When the race is going, and you hear the actual crowd, them last 10, 15 laps, and the crowd is getting into it, you ain't got no choice but to get into it. Now you locked in, you know what's going on, you know who the cars are, you know who doing what, who moving a certain way. And here's the fun part. Chicago saw history with the same dude won 4 different races over these last 3 years. And he had a fan base leaving Chicago. Initially, we thought these suburbanites who don't even like Chicago gonna pull up in here talking crazy and we gotta deal with them. Man, there was a lot of Chicagoans out there. It was a lot of people that were sitting down there. And I remember telling Sarah, I was like, man, this is a Chicago event. This ain't no NASCAR event. This is a Chicago event.
Nah, the angles were fire. You mentioned Shane Van Gisbergen, who won 4 of the 6 races. And I will say him alongside the other racers spoke very highly of Chicago, of the race, even with 2 years of rain delays.
Yep.
A lot of these individuals, Shane included, said is one of his favorite races. They look forward to it. You mentioned that it was well organized. It didn't feel packed. Could you argue, and maybe I'm just being biased here, could you argue that it felt less cluttered and less, the lines weren't as long because it just wasn't as well attended, right? They wanted 100,000, maybe got closer to 79 or 80. Or was it still packed and well organized? Or was it well organized because it wasn't as, packed as a Lala, for example?
Well, I mean, it definitely isn't as packed as Lala. I feel like Lala is, you're catering to a much larger target market. So it's definitely for sure way less attended than that. But I just think it's the way the space was taken advantage of. You had the entire center of Grant Park was just walking space.
Yeah.
So all the activations were happening off to the side. So when people were watching the race, I mean, it was packed up against the fence. So you could see that there's a ton of people there.
I think a lot of people said and I love the Taste of Chicago. I want the Taste of Chicago to come personally. I like that Midsummer Classic Taste of Chicago where you got events. Personally, I like it. But we gotta be real with it. The way the Taste of Chicago been these last few years, man, it ain't had that punch. I love the neighborhood idea, and so when you compare it to something that is Chicago,
hey, they had John B last year, man. That was fine.
I know, but and they got a good lineup this year. You know what I'm saying? But
I've liked the setup of the Taste downtown. I like the way the streets have been used, the stage has been set up.
I think when I compare it to that, and to answer your question, that's a good call. Is it people versus organization, or is it organization versus people? I think it's a mixture of both. Like Sarah said, they probably got 70,000. It ain't crowded packed, but the use of Grant Park, I don't know if we've seen it that organized. You know what I mean? That spacious. And I know a lot of people say, man, well, you're taking up the, our open park, free park throughout the, in the summertime, in the biggest part of the summer. Yeah, but you can go there and still do a lot of things in a great portion of the park and not even have to buy a ticket. You know what I'm saying? All they doing is just checking the bag, make sure that, you're not bringing nothing crazy into the open free part. And there's open and free parts on both sides of the event. So there's still a lot of space that is free and open to the public.
I'm gonna be honest, the free stuff wasn't as well advertised. I didn't realize there was so much you could do even if you weren't coming to the race proper.
I agree.
Yes.
Yep.
So that was one of the things that they know that they should have gotten better at, is advertising the free stuff.
Can you see the race at all from the free sections, or if they have it organized in a way that it's like provides a terrible vantage point, so you still would need to purchase a ticket? Or
I think the only space you can see it is probably on the bridge. Like if you're on the bridge by the Art Institute, you see it.
Yeah.
But it's just too far from the actual race track for you to be able to see it in that section.
Right.
So strategic that it brings you closer, gives you something to do, even if you're not paying.
Yeah, you can definitely hear it.
But still enticing enough to be like, maybe you want to come in. Maybe you want to come in. Exactly. I mean, the ticket prices, I think they dropped this past year. I think the average might have been close to 200, but you could find it for like 40 to 100.
Yep.
You know, for somebody who, you know, wasn't a fan of NASCAR, just wanted to not have any FOMO. Do you think this last version of it was worth the price of admission?
Yes, I think it was. It made it a Chicago thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like NASCAR that we think going around in a big circle track taking left turns. It's not that. You know what I'm saying? It's downtown Chicago, racing by the Buckingham Fountain, racing by the Art Institute of Chicago on Lakeshore Drive. With the city skyline. They don't have that nowhere else in NASCAR. You know what I'm saying? Would Sarah and I go to a NASCAR event in another location, right? I don't know if we would have the same fun because it's so many, we don't have the Chicago people around us and that attitude. But the event itself and seeing the cars, I mean, now we got an attachment to SVG. You know what I mean? Like, he that dude.
That was the winner, y'all, if y'all didn't get I know somebody was like, what's Shea Gilgeous-Alexander got to do with this? He said SVG, not SGA.
I would want it to come back to Chicago for sure. I feel like it's something that if we lose, we're going to be like, damn, we were the first street race and now we're not anymore. And do I want it to stay in Grant Park? I feel like it's a beautiful backdrop. As someone that now lives in the South Loop, I completely understand the traffic. I hated it, but I just took the train around.
Yeah.
The pedestrian sidewalks getting cut off was a little annoying.
Yeah, that is.
Sure.
You know, there's some annoying parts. I will say this though, and I want people to think about this. There's a reason NASCAR said, "Hey, let's come to Chicago and not Joliet." You got to think about that choice that NASCAR made to already have an established fan base, to leave from a place that is already popular, and to say we're going to do something as bold to come to the city. To me, that says we want Chicagoans, you know, to love this sport, right? That's got to stand for something. You know what I'm saying? Like, it ain't, they're not here just because, you know, we think it's a money grab and yada, yada, yada. To be honest with you, where else you going to do this at? Like, they got Sonoma, but like Sonoma is Sonoma. You know what I'm saying? Like, Chicago is Chicago. Like, we had the first street race ever anyway, stock car race ever. So it belongs here, in my opinion.
Come on, Chicago history.
You know? Personally, I don't care when they have the race. You know what I mean? Like, you can have the race anytime. You know, I think it's a fun event because we Chicagoans, let's know one thing. We gonna complain regardless. You know what I mean? Like, we gonna complain regardless of time. So, you know, I don't care when they have it. And as far as the weather thing, it's a street race, goddammit. That's as Chicago as it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, let it be. You know what I mean? Go ahead, right? Hey, honestly, I would love to see some snow. Let's see if they can handle that. You know what I mean? Like,
all right, now you wildin'. Yeah. Now you wildin'. I was like maybe moving back a couple weeks into early August. He was like, I don't care when it is. In fact, bring it back during November.
Yeah, bring it back. October, you know?
It won't work.
And we're a hard city to win over. Like you said, we were going to complain regardless. But I think the hope for some people who are still on the fence, whether it's from an economic side, they'd like to see the city get a better deal, to get more money out of it, for the economic impact to grow beyond the neighborhood. And then on the other end, I do think I agree with you all. I think by making Chicago see themselves in NASCAR more, that could help. But you know, like you said, we got events that's been here for decades, like Lala, and we still find ways to shit on Lala every single year.
We're always shocked when it's happening. Like, we didn't know it's been happening. Like, it's been going since the 90s. Why are we
I don't know.
I can't say that at the end of this conversation, I'd be convinced to go. But, I never say never. And if the tickets is free, you might see me.
Yeah. I mean, dude, like, I know you would like it. I know you would like it, bro.
I want to give a huge thank you to our guests today. Every time y'all stop by, it's a good time. From 77 Flavors of Chicago, the History and Culture podcast, co-host Dario Durham.
Yes, sir.
And Sarah Fada.
Thank you so much.
Some good news. I am back hosting another Moth Story Slam this week. You can catch me Wednesday at the Promontory in Hyde Park starting at 7, and the theme is road trip. All you got to do, grab your ticket, pull up, and why not throw your name in the hat to tell a 5-minute story? And who knows? Maybe you get like me and you'll win one of these things, and then you'll look up in a few years and they'll ask you to host, and you can start a almost decade-long career hosting story slams across the city and grand slams across the city and moth slams across the entire country. I have been very fortunate, but it all starts with putting your name in a hat. So I'll see you on Wednesday. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace. This year's NASCAR course may have been cleared from Grant Park, but the race's future in Chicago is still very much, I am stumbling over that. But the race's future in Chicago is still very much up for debate. I should have just practiced it before I said it. I just started going. Because I was like, those are all small words. That'd be good. But they pair together very interestingly. All right, this is the one right here. Third time's the charm, like NASCAR.